Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the presentation today that Dr. Pezzuto has very graciously agreed to put on for us, along with a special guest who he has invited, Dr. Kostyuk. Just to get started, here's the agenda for the day. We're going to just do a brief introduction and general housekeeping, and then I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Pezzuto, who will introduce himself and our guest speaker for the day. And then we're going to go into our Q&A session and our closing remarks. Just as a reminder to everybody, the session is being recorded today. Please ensure that you stay muted and that your cameras are off during the presentations. Because we want to be able to get through the presentations, we're very short on time. We want to make sure that you're adding your questions to the chat during the presentations, and we'll address them all at the end during the Q&A session. With that said, I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Pezzuto to get started.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Carla, and good afternoon to everybody. Yeah, it's a great pleasure to be here and to welcome all of you, and most of all, of course, to have this opportunity in this moment, this challenging moment for all of us, to address, to discuss, to share with you our thoughts on this important topic. Today we are very lucky because in addition to the support of all of you, we also have a guest speaker from Ukraine, which is a colleague, a friend that I've been working with for many years, and is the editor-in-chief of a scholarly journal and an expert of the governance and the country. So without further ado, let me start sharing with you my presentation. Yeah, I hope you can see it. So what I would do, I would start by presenting my points, my reflections on this economic consequences or potential economic impact of this conflict. And then, of course, I will add over the analysis to my colleague, Professor Kostyuk, and then we will do this Q&A session with based on your questions at the end. So, great. Just a quick message for those of you who have not met me before. Some of you have been in my courses, others have not. This is my background. I teach ISM, Global Economics and Competitiveness.
Sorry, Dr. Pezzuto, we're not able to see your screen at the moment.
Oh, all right. So sorry for that. I'm going to share it again. I hope you can see it now. Sorry for that. Can you see it now? Carla, do you see it?
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
Wonderful. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, sorry for that, that for those of you who have been with my courses, my activities, you know that I teach global economics and competitiveness at ISM since a number of years, also other courses like digital transformation and so on. I'm Italian, but I grew up in the US, and you know, I've always been involved with economics, international business and scenario analysis, global analysis. This is my background, so you can see pretty much my profile, my background. I would like to spend a couple of words about our special guest today, our guest speaker, who is moving on to the next page. Which is, I'll introduce him a little bit, Professor Alexander Kostyuk. Professor Kostyuk is a full professor of the Ukrainian Academy of Business of Banking of the National Bank of Ukraine. He's a visiting professor at Lanka School of Economics. He's been teaching also at the University of Nuremberg and is an affiliate in Sweden, and also the director of Virtus Global Center for Corporate Governance, Virtus Interpress. That's why I've been working with him, because I was part of the editorial board of this publisher in Ukraine. He's the editor-in-chief of Corporate Ownership and Control Journal, and is an established scholar with the European Association of Science Editors and with the International Corporate Governance Society and many other experiences. So he's a well-known expert on topics of corporate governance, and of course on his country. He has a PhD in corporate finance and a degree in the BA degree, and also has been teaching many courses in the country and abroad. You'll have the pleasure to listen to him, and most of all, to get his insight from where he is located, because today he's calling us, he's talking with us on Zoom from his town in Ukraine. Okay, so let me start with this analysis. One of the big questions these days is, what about globalization? And many thoughts come through, what are the potential consequences, economic and social, and so on. My first thought, of course, goes to the Ukrainian people, of course, and the people victims of this war. This is, first of all, a humanitarian crisis. So today we will address an economic side. Again, these days, economics is very important. The impact is going to be probably a lasting impact on the economy, not just in Ukraine and not just on Europe, probably in many countries. But of course, humanitarian side is the most dramatic these days. So not to undermine the economic, but economic, it's number two today. Definitely, this is no priority number one. But still, for this meeting, we want to also see what could be the potential economic impact if this war conflict will last short or long. Of course, this has been a shocking experience because no one would have expected in 2022 in Europe to have a conflict. We thought it was something that belonged to previous generations, and we forgot, fortunately, what it was like to do that. But that's what happened. The other day, many of you probably read in the newspaper, Larry Fink, the CEO and chairman of BlackRock, making a strong statement to his shareholders in the 2022 letter, where he said, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has put an end to the globalization we have experienced over the last 3 decades, the one we've known in the last 3 decades. This is a strong statement, of course, but also relevant one. By the way, BlackRock is the world's largest, the biggest asset manager based in New York, with asset under management exceeding $10 trillion. So this guy knows what he's talking about, and he has business globally. So he definitely has a vision of what's going on. My analysis of what this statement means, and we heard a lot about that, and this is an important point? Is this a turning point? Is this a tipping point for globalization? We've heard many times in the last few years and months, are we in the deglobalization stage? Is the China-US trade tension start of deglobalization? And we've seen that for a while, I would like to show you this slide and the next one to say that today, fortunately, we have this horrible conflict. But despite COVID-19, which was already a very painful experience, and this new, unfortunately, event, we have certainly a significant challenge to our economic development, or at least a temporary painful impact. But from these pictures, and here I'm thinking about what's going on in the last few years, especially after COVID, we've found a new driver of energy and new drivers of growth. We're thinking about decarbonization. We're thinking about electric vehicles, about renewables, about solar, photovoltaic, and wind, and the nuclear, clean nuclear and green hydrogen. We are actually doing this green or whatever, transition and renewals and the new direction. At least we're trying to find a transition. So the direction we are taking is definitely a direction for growth, for recovery, and many of this stuff, I'm thinking about electric cars, but all the others, they really are, many of these are even international global business. They are not just local. Just like when we think about chips, semiconductor, many of this stuff, we are reshoring, we are bringing back home some of this stuff, Intel and the others. But many of this business, especially, automobile, whatever, or electric vehicle, many of this business are really by nature, e-commerce and online, by nature, they are very much global and local. So it's hard sometimes to think how globalization can be really dead or close to be dead, because we are really reinventing the economy in a connected way. And it's hard to believe all the progress we've done, it can be just undermined by one event. The next slide also gives you the rest of the thoughts, where we are today with digitalization, digital transmission, digital manufacturing, Internet of Things, within the manufacturing inside, in the supply chains, in the virtual reality, in the blockchain platforms, and so on. So, and many of this stuff are really, and cloud, many of this stuff, it's really something that's there because it allowed the world to connect and to trade and to grow and to expand even more. So it's almost like, we can't really go back to here, end of globalization, or at least it's possible to a certain extent. But the forces of globalization are still alive and well, despite these great challenges. So I came up with this short page in which I said, okay, yes, Larry Fink, it's correct. We will have some reshoring and nearshoring. Nearshoring means, nearby, you don't bring it back necessarily to US, maybe it could be Mexico or Canada or somewhere in Central America, or, Europe for us, or other parts, Africa, whatever. We might have shorter supply chains than the ones we've had, but most of all, more reliable, more diversified business trading partners, so that we don't fall into the trap that we experience with countries relying at 80%, 70%, 50% on Russian gas or whatever, So you don't want to be, or even China or Taiwan or whatever other country it is that you rely 100%, or by now that semiconductor chips are made 80% in Asia, mostly in Taiwan and in South Korea, Samsung, but at least the top ones in terms of quality. But yeah, of course, there are national security concerns, because I can't afford that we get stuck with shortages, with bottlenecks, with lack, and then we have this a terrible mismatch between supply and demand. And as we've seen with COVID, when there is a peak of demand or reopening or whatever, and backlog in production, in shipping, in other stuff like that, then we have this supply shock. And combined with demand, social pent-up demand, reopening the economy, that we find ourselves in the situation we have with rising, soaring prices and stuff like that. Of course, we need to rethink our supply chains. We need to rethink our just-in-time. We need to rethink our, strategic storage and inventory and stuff like that. Domestic and regional strategic resources are very important, and components, chips or whatever. So definitely, yeah, we will have that. We have in Europe, we have it in US, and the Chip Act that President Biden and the European Union also and the other countries are saying, okay, we need to bring back the high quality chips, because we find ourselves with the automobile industry, they are running out of stuff. As you know, during the COVID, we were already hurt by that. There was a boom with people buying computers, e-commerce and stuff like that at home, and during the pandemic, lockdowns. And of course, that was meant shortages for cars and other appliances. And of course, there was then the peak of demand and all the stuff that we know. So it's important to have security reasons or strategic industries, or to have some kind of reshoring or nearshoring, or bringing back some of the strategic stuff for security reasons or other. You don't want to be dependent too much on some countries. So we might have some kind of hybrid model, a model between globalization and deglobalization, or what they call typically multipolar world, multiple blocks. It is possible. It is possible. It depends on how these things evolve. As it is with the US and China and the trade war, tariff war we had since Trump, we already had sort of bipolar type of world moving that way. Then that bipolars might become a multipolar. We'll see how things will evolve. For the moment, the Western bloc is still pretty much globalized. This is a very important point for me. Younger generations today are much more open-minded, social, digitally savvy, connected than previous ones. So what I'm trying to say is that maybe we need to think, when we think about deglobalization, that in actual fact, if we look around and we think our students, our kids, our children, we find out that they are global in the mindset. I'm sure the students of Alex in Ukraine are just as connected as my students in France, Italy, US, or the students of our colleagues in US. And I see them. I even had Russian students in my classrooms, and they are open-minded, that they are global like everybody else. Perhaps the leader of his country is not. He's living in another century. But the younger generations are open-minded, social, digitally savvy. So it's really weird to think, with this digitally connected world I showed you before, with this socially connected, open-minded, globally minded younger generations, how can you go back and say globalization is dead? Robots, automations, production enhancements, digitalizations, sustainability-related projects, they all will drive more effective reshoring, because it used to be very expensive to produce in rich countries, but with the new technologies, all this automation, digitalization, robotic, whatever, and you can actually bring back some stuff as for semiconductor and still create regional hubs and clusters where, Tesla is a very good example. It's producing in Germany, but at cost competitive advantage versus even the German producers, despite not cheap salaries in the country, because he has a level of productivity that's so high that he can afford to do that. And that's the way you can think you can bring back some stuff and still be competitive. So technological leaps moving forward, big data, cloud computing, edge computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT, all this stuff together with quantum computing, blockchain, nuclear energy, green hydrogen, but this stuff will drive innovations and productivity and will make it possible for us to be successful even regionally at home. But because of this nature of this industry, we will see still global. Let's just think about one thing. Think about COVID. I think how we managed to succeed to find a vaccine. It was impossible in a single country. We needed global collaboration for that initiative. Now, if we won with COVID because the world collaborated with the vaccine, it's impossible to think that scientists will just lock themselves in the closet and work in the single place. It doesn't make sense. It's not the way our generations and our technology are designed. So I do believe that Larry Fink is right to a certain extent with this provocation, but I tend to believe we passed the tipping point. Globalization is structural. There could be some kind of hybrid model, multipolar, but it's unlikely that we will go back despite this temporary shock that we are experiencing, which is very bad for those in Ukraine and the others, of course. But I still believe that globalization, it's hard to die. To be more specific, but this doesn't mean that Russia is not going to hurt. Russia is going to be painful. For why? Why is that? I just want to give you a couple of data. Russia is the key supplier in the energy, one of the key suppliers in the energy market, oil and gas, as you all know. It's a big providers, one of the big providers of wheat in the world, and many countries rely on Russia for that. Metals, fertilizers, big one. So at Russia, it's in terms of GDP, is not a superpower. It's just a small percentage of GDP globally, but it's a powerhouse for commodities, and that means a lot. That by sanctioning very hard, which of course makes sense, given that you don't want to engage into full-blown war with NATO, the sanctions is one of the few tools that we have, or at least we hope they are effective. And but Russia is it's a powerhouse for commodities, and that cause some pain, and is already doing it, as you can see. Sanctioning Russia, which makes a lot of sense from the point of view of the atrocious things they are doing to Ukrainian people, have led to the rise, have contributed to rise commodity prices, which were already under shock because of the COVID and all the stuff we talked before, the bottlenecks and the all the things we had. So Russia response to international sanctions following the invasion has been, to halt the exports of more than 200 products. And we are there, tug of war. I don't send you that, you don't send me that. I block you here, I block your financial reserves. I don't let you use the SWIFT payments. It's a set of sanctions and retaliations on both sides. It's a sort of escalation from this point of view. But let's dig deeper a little bit and see how much pain can Russia cause to us. Crude oil is Russia's biggest export, accounting for 123 billion of its export revenues, data 2018. Next to the list of refined petroleum, things like petrol and diesel, 66.2 billion are worth this set of resources. Gas at 26.3 billion, and coal at 17.6 billion. But Russia is also world's largest exporter of wheat. And a lot of countries rely on that, bringing 8.14 billion from sales in 2019. It is also the biggest exporter of semi-finished iron. This includes iron bar and other items used to make iron products, with the sales worth just about under 7 billion in 2018. And the largest suppliers of nickel. As we all know, we saw shocking price increase there, 4.3 billion. And nitrogen-based fertilizer, that's why food around it's a problem now, because the fertilizer is an issue. And also, of course, there is a lot of problem there in that industry and others. In summary, as I said, Russia could be labeled as a commodity superpower, well integrated, at least until before the conflict, in the global economy before the invasion, of course. It was well integrated. So some people said, Russia is like Lehman. People disconnected the Lehmans. The Lehman went to bankruptcy and they didn't think of the consequences of that. How interconnected was with the rest of the financial market. So Russia is highly interconnected with global investment. So even the companies fleeing from, going away, dropping Russia business, they will have to face some write-downs, some losses, or some nationalization. So we don't really know the consequences, how big they are, because this is a powerhouse in at least a number of industries. In terms of raw material, Russia is also the second largest exporter of cobalt. Does it sound familiar? Cobalt is one of those things that we need for the electric cars, which is one of the top strategic industries of the future. One of the key elements used making rechargeable batteries, and it is the world's second largest supplier of vanadium, which is used for large-scale energy storage and streamline. Not to talk about palladium, which is another big resource that Russia controls significantly. Russia is the sixth largest exporter of gold, according to accounting for 4.4% of the world supply, and the 10th biggest suppliers of lead. Russia accounts for 10% of the world supply of nickel, which is used to make stainless steel and vehicle batteries. The price of nickel soared by 250% in a day on fears that sanctions would hit supplies, and the London Metal Exchange even suspended trading of the metal because of the unprecedented price rises in the past weeks. Russia's exports of palladium account for 20.3% of global supply, and the country is the world's fourth largest exporter of tungsten. The country also supplies small quantities of manganese, which is used for glass making, drink cans, and as paint pigments, and zinc, used for making car bodies. Russia covers 3.5% of global demand for copper, and copper prices have hit record highs in March 2022. So if you look at this chart, you can see that in the top oil producers, Russia is number 3, only after US and Saudi Arabia. And if you look at the other one, you can see where the gas of Russia goes, mostly a lot, almost 50%, only 50 billions of cubic meters in Germany, huge, to almost 30 billions of cubic meters in Italy, Belarus, Turkey, and so on. So imagine now you understand why Germany is getting a little bit nervous, despite the fact that it may still decide to, act and take together with the other countries, the stand and do the embargo on full embargo, even on energy, if necessary. Although it's going to be challenging, at least for the initial period. Here again, you can see better what we're talking about. Russia and Ukraine together are very important for this. Wheat, you can see 30% of commodity export between the two. Palladium, 25%, it's just Russia. And palladium is essential when you look into computers, electronics, stuff like that. Fertilizers, that has a massive impact on agricultural industries. Maize, nickel, palladium, gold, and so on. And you can see here, sunflower. It's almost impossible to find around today sunflower oil and seeds, and prices are going crazy, even for barley, colza seeds, corn. So this is just to say, yes, Russia is not Europe, is not the US, is not China, but when it comes to commodity market, it can do a lot of damage to a lot of countries if they alter the sanctions suspend, which does not mean that we need to justify whatever crime Russia is doing. Of course not. But we need to, if we talk about economics for a moment and economic implications, we need to be aware of what Russia and Ukraine mean. This is really the powerhouse for agriculture. Of course, we have other countries who can deliver that, of course. By the way, this is interesting to know. The eastern area of Ukraine, which Russia is trying to control, it's also a strategic area because it's where most of the resources we just talked are concentrated. So much of the gas, much of the strategic resources that Ukraine has and Russia wants very much to control are actually located in that eastern area that Russia is trying to control and continue to control even more than before. So it's geopolitical things, but it's also business, because this adds a lot more power in this sort of commodity war. And here you can see, of course, how many countries directly import Russia stuff, natural gas, which is probably the most important and most vulnerable of the resources they export. Again, since all of you know how important is electric car industry for the future, and how amazing is the growth of that industry worldwide, you can see how the price of batteries have gone down over the years. And here you can see on the right what's happening right now to the cost of these commodities, lithium, nickel, cobalt, which are critical for electric vehicles. And of course, due to this Russian-Ukraine conflict, and adding to the previous crisis with COVID and everything, this is becoming even more difficult, especially on lithium, as you can see up here. When we look at the data, Brent, crude oil, corn and wheat, natural gas, metals, you can really see the shock. Prices skyrocketing and making it almost impossible for some companies without subsidies and other stuff, price cap or some kind of contribution, to really get by in a moment in which you all of a sudden find your bill that's going crazy. And most of all, this is making life difficult for central banks. This is inflation expectations. So as you can see, when the Federal Reserve, when the European Central Bank and the others will have to decide to continue in their normalization of the monetary policy, because of course high inflation force them to raise interest rates or to start doing the normalizations after years of QE and accommodative monetary policy. When you start seeing and say, well, oh my God, UK has inflation expectations around 5%. Oh my God, that's in 5 years, and also US has inflation expectations exceeding 3%, which is okay, but a bit above the traditional 2%. It's not terribly bad, but still it's, and this, it's getting worse moving forward, because again, if the conflict ends tomorrow, yes, but if the conflict doesn't end tomorrow, we might have to rethink the inflation expectations down the line. How is Russia coping with this situation and their impact there? Well, you can see, they had a crash into the currency depreciation due to the sanctions and everything, and the currency collapse. So the central bank was forced to raise interest rates, 20%. That's a lot. And here, this is the CDS, credit default swaps. So you can see what it costs to protect yourself from exposure to Russia in case of default. And you can see what happened to this kind of sort of insurance for potential default. And by the way, Russia was downgraded by rating agencies to junk status. All three major rating agencies, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, and Fitch, recently. But Russia managed in various ways to recover a little bit and to have a little bit of rebound, at least temporarily, on its currency, the ruble, as you can see here. The Russian currency has staged a more remarkable comeback, at least recently, after taking a massive beating due to Western sanctions on Moscow. In the days following the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, February 24th, one of the most notable economic fallouts for Moscow came in the form of crashing ruble. The currency kept sinking to fresh record lows against the US dollars as Western sanctions piled up. Much of the foreign currency reserves held by Russian central banks, as you know, were frozen, SWIFT and everything, and rating agencies downgraded the Russian credit score to junk. At one point in early March 2022, the ruble had crashed by more than a third. The ruble has since recovered and is now trading around levels last seen before the invasion, in a sign that the initial impact of sanctions, some of the hardest in history, could be wearing off for the moment. A part of the recovery can be explained by the stronger financial position that Russia finds itself in thanks to the steep rise in revenues. By the way, They are still selling, at least to Europeans, oil and gas. And since prices are going skyrocketing, they are making more money. The rise in revenues from oil and gas exports and sharp drops in imports because of sanctions. This is actually strengthening the position. Bloomberg Economics expects Russia will earn nearly 321 billion, that is dollars, 292 billion euros from energy export this year, up more than 1/3 from last year, despite everything. It's a major, if its major customers, including European Union, will continue to buy and will not pursue the embargo. The rebound is the result of the ruble being artificially pumped up by the Russian central bank through capital controls. But of course, the Russian economy now does not have the same outlook as it did in the middle of February before the invasion. The Russian economy, which the IMF in January forecasted would grow 2.8, now they expect to shrink by 10-15%. The central banks more than doubled the country's key interest rates to 20%. As you saw, restricted the local firms' access to foreign currency. They pulled on this foreign reserves, and set limits to withdrawals in foreign currency. The ruble got another major boost when Russia President Vladimir Putin demanded that unfriendly countries, as basically Western countries, pay for Russian gas in Russian currency instead of euros and dollars. That's, of course, to basically to stabilize the crashing ruble. Putin, however, climbed down from his initial position and allowed foreign buyers to continue paying in a foreign currency, but only after opening special accounts at the Russian Gazprom Bank, the bank of the gas company, which would convert the payment into ruble. Russia has imposed on Gazprom Bank and other to convert 80% of their currency payments, basically their foreign reserves, into rubles. Russia currency is expected to struggle further when the West will wean itself off Russian oil and gas, and that sooner or later will happen. So as you can see here, this is the junk status that companies, rating agencies give to Russia. So everybody's saying, oh, it's going to go bankrupt or default soon. Nevertheless, you can see that the debt, the bonds, Ukrainian and the Russian, basically have been spiking recently because, of course, the sanctions and potential risk of default. Now, what's the outlook? Well, if you look at the data, including Reuters, inflation is going to be tough in 2022, also due to this. It was already there because of the COVID aftermath. Now this is getting even worse, and this is going to be especially painful for some emerging and developing countries. It's high in Europe, US, as it is. No, we're talking already pretty high rate, but it's going to be even more difficult, especially for those countries that have the foreign denominated debt imbalances. They are net importers. They have a weak balance sheet. They have a weak balance of payments, and there are a number of countries in this situation. And they are importers and relying a lot on Russia for imports and stuff, and of course on Ukraine, because Ukraine now has also significant damage from the war for export. Just to give you an example, the soaring grain and oil prices will hardly hit a number of emerging and developing countries. Look at the Turkish inflation surge, which was already bad before the pandemic, but look, 61%. Surging global energy prices probably propelled Turkish inflation to its fastest rate in 2 decades. In March, Turkish imports almost all of its oil and natural gas it consumes. And this is not just Russia. Many of the countries, the Eastern European countries, are there. In the month of September 2021, they had the rate cut, and lira tumbled 40% against the dollar, now setting off an inflation spiral. Now, recently, a sharp rise in commodity prices triggered the Russian invasion of Ukraine, has only made this thing worse. So this country is going to have another big problem. It's just one of them. You can see that many Arab and African states rely significantly on food and energy. As we said before, Russia is a powerhouse when it comes to commodities. The rapidly changing global environment and spillovers from the war related to the war in Ukraine are posing important challenges for countries, especially developing and emerging countries. In Peru, mounting protests and angers over rising fuel and food prices will push the government into subsidies. Peru is a net importer of both refined and crude oil, making it particularly vulnerable to global energy shocks, market shocks, like the current ones. Egypt is the world's biggest wheat importer and is heavily reliant on supplies from Russia and Ukraine, and has been subsidized bread programs which feed 70 million people. In Sri Lanka, there was a social unrest. Current account crisis has intensified after the West fired the tough sanctions on Russia, rolling blackouts, and a lot of problems with access to food and energy has basically shocked the country, they lost tourists, which is one of the major sources of foreign exchange. Inflation, it's hit 30.2%, and the currency had a 40% depreciation against the US dollar in 1 month. Public debt is estimated to 120%, which is about 40% higher than can be sustainable. And here you can see the link between soaring food prices and inflation and social unrest and political unrest in various countries from historical Arab Springs and stuff like that. So, and here you can see also gas embargo would hit Russia hardest because gas is the most important one. So I don't want to take too much of your time. I just want to say, yes, globalization started to slow down after global financial crisis, and more protectionism because of job losses or insecurity sparked after that. We have this sequence from the global financial crisis, then we had the trade war spat between Trump and China, and then we had the COVID impact, and now this one. So all these four events have somehow increased the tensions, the protectionism to a certain extent, and deglobalization to a certain extent. So how do I see it to complete this message in terms of outlook? Well, we see that there are a lot of reasons to worry why Russia, it's probably going to lose this war, but it can do a lot of damage even to the others in terms of European leaders fragmenting and not remaining together because of conflicting interests. That might creating problems to countries in the emerging development markets that have no access to food and energy at acceptable rates. So there can be a lot. In other words, I want to say Russia may crash, but it can also have significant fallout problems if this thing is going to last long. So my point is, it all depends on how far does it last and how deep the sanctions, the problems will impact, how much this sanction will fire back or will have spillover effect. So it will all depend on how long it will last. It will depend on how the conflict will end. Victory, loss, who's going to win, how? Whether it will escalate, will it remain just Ukraine and Russia conflict, or will it become a NATO conflict, or will be a third world war? How much damage will sanction and embargo do to Russia and other countries? How long Russia can withstand the sanctions, and how will it be able to, or will it be able to circumvent? And just to see this, hold on a sec. I have to. Sorry, I had to say one thing, and I just wanted to say a little note on this. My remark is this: countries that are missing foods and beverages and basic needs probably will try to buy this stuff from Russia. Of course, it's going to be easy because to transport gas, you need pipelines. With oil, it's easier. With carbon, it's easier. But the point is, especially countries in need, when there is demand, there is also supply. Supply will find a way. That's no matter how many sanctions you put, supply will find. And you have seen that already with India. We've seen that already with maybe China to a certain extent, some countries in South America, many countries in Africa, and so on. Some countries in the Middle East. So my point is that we don't know if they will be able to circumvent and still provide this and still sell this stuff and withstand for a long time the war. What will be the role of China and the other relevant countries to support Russia or to continue to buy or to help them in the financial markets or to help them with cross-border payments? Will the EU countries impose a ban on all the energy? Will the EU issue a new recovery fund for Eurobonds, whatever, for storage and purchase, energy independence and defense, or not? Or will they fight and they will fragment their things? Will US and Ukraine conflict cause a long-lasting recession or a period of slow growth and high inflation or even a stagflation? Well, that depends how long will it take. How bad the shortages and soaring prices of raw materials and components will get, how long the disrupted supply chain will last, and how painful that will be. Shall we see, we will see that crisis, a financial crisis or systemic risk, as the European Stability Board, Financial Stability Board may anticipate on their indicator of risks of systemic risk. So all these are questions that find the answer, best case, worst case, baseline scenario, only depending on how long will it take and how much this embargo and sanctions will fire back. Of course, are we at the beginning of a new world order? It depends. If it's just Russia or if Russia is just one member of a new bloc of other blocs trying to change the world order, the dollar dominance, the way the world it is. Globalization, the Western way, or globalization, the Eastern way, or the authoritarian countries way. I'm done. I just want to leave you with this message. Much will depend whether we go from a mild recession and high inflation and some social unrest, or we may go all the way into a full-blown crisis, or even worse conflict, or even that financial crisis will depend on when are we going to stop this horrible tragedy. I would like to pass on the message, the speech to my colleague, Professor Alexander Kostyuk from the University of Ukraine. And thank you for your attention. And most of all, please, before I introduce you to Professor Kostyuk, support the Ukraine, support Virtus Interpress, the Virtus Global Center for Corporate Governance, Professor Kostyuk, which is trying to help Ukrainian scholars, students, researchers survive and thrive in a very difficult moment. So before I present you, pass on the word to Professor Kostyuk, please, when you receive this PowerPoint, take note of his details, his bank account, and please help this support Ukraine and Ukrainian researchers and scholars, because Professor Kostyuk and his team is working day and night during the war to make his scholarly research successful. Thank you and bless you. Alex, it's your turn.
Thank you very much. I will thank you. I think I liked your presentation very, very much, absolutely, because I think that you have recognized very important issue, very strong issue, and Europe and other countries of the world didn't want to recognize it during the last 3 decades. And this issue is the following. No commodity superpower, I mean country like Russia, cannot control process or globalization, because it's very dangerous, painful, and costly, like this time for whole the world. This is a problem. So during the last 3 decades, Russia tries to dictate what they want to do worldwide. Successfully, I think they did it successfully, but recently they tried to mix their economic requests worldwide with some sort of ideology. And finally, they made a mistake because their ideology is absolutely non-humankind ideology, non-human. From this point of view, what should we expect? We need to see that the world should transform its relationships between countries, economic relationships, and diversify. I absolutely agree with you. Chains of supply chains, better say, of commodities. And Russia should not be commodity superpower anymore. It's costly, yes, now it's costly. Like for Germany, you have mentioned that, for example, if Germany is going to introduce sanctions against Russia related to gas, they will lose about 40 billion American dollars. I mean, Russia will. But where to find this gas for Germany? It will be very important, very strong shock for the economy, German economy. But this is a payment Germany should pay now. Else, nothing will change. Again, in a year, in a 2, in a 5, 10 years, 20 years, globalization will fail again. And Russia will say, okay, we need to mix our ideology with our commodity superpower status. And they will do the same. They will invade not only Ukraine, they will invade Europe and other countries. You need to try to fix very strong distinction between the value of human life and the value of human power. Human power is about money. Life is not about money. It's about some sort of God gift for us. No superpower can dictate us what to do. Now, you have just mentioned that as for Ukraine, that Ukraine is strong for several commodities. Yes, we have very strong metallurgy, for example, and iron produced by metallurgy. We have very strong agriculture, very strong machine building, and so on. But almost all, I mean, most factories and plants, metallurgical plants, machine building plants, agricultural plants are located in the eastern part of Ukraine, where I'm located. My city, city of Sum, is located about 40 kilometers from the border with Russia. And just a remark, they entered our country with their troops, military troops, more than a month ago. It was on February 24. It was the start of this war. They moved around our city, tried to move to Kiev. It's about 300 kilometers. They thought they could, but they could not. Not more than 100 kilometers from our city, not more. All of them have been killed. Their tanks have been destroyed, burned, and so on. No, they tried to find another way of thinking. They headquartered 40 kilometers near to our city and tried to send their tanks once again to Kiev without any success. Now the strongest, the largest, their tank brigade army, more than 1,000 tanks, doesn't exist anymore. Just a month. So they are not clever, absolutely, and not only about military invasions. In commodity trades also. So now we need to recognize that Russia is strong just for their resources, but not for the way of thinking, how to use these resources with the interests of whole world and to the interest of the globalization, the process. Their way of thinking is not sustainable at all. So what should we do? Okay, let's recognize that we need to provide some sort of peace to Russia and to restrict, get rid of all these sanctions imposed on Russia before. Nothing will change. I remind you again, in 10 years, the same will happen, but not to Ukraine. They will never come to Ukraine because they have already failed here in military way. because 3 days ago, they left, escaped, better said, retreated, their troops, Russian troops from northern part of Ukraine, northern eastern part of Ukraine, and almost all eastern part of Ukraine. Just southern eastern part of Ukraine, called Donbass, they want to have some sort of small victory, because this is a part of their propaganda, and the day of victory in the Second World War is approaching. This is May 9. They hope to introduce their imitation of victory just in Donbass and nothing more, nowhere more in Ukraine, to their society. Elsewhere, the society will be disordered, and Putin would have an empire under the terms of revolution. To be frank, for me, I think it would be better for them to escape, to fix their case, and to start communicate with other countries in diplomatic way, like Germany, like France, like USA, and probably in a year or two, situation to some extent would be easier than now, and from the point of view of export and import of some commodities, for the world too. But Russia should have some lesson, should learn that there is no any sort of rule for them, any sort of power for them, and right for them to behave in the way they want to do. They blackmail all the world with their status of commodity superpower. So we need to provide them with some sort of signal that this is not the case to repeat again, to happen again. For Ukraine, what should we do? Just our army and community of people, people located here. We have about 40 million citizens in Ukraine. This is very huge number to resist. And in the military way, no way for Putin to win, no way. And in this case, Europe and the rest of the world would say the following: okay, what is the compromise for us between interest in the economic point of view, in the interest of humankind point of view, principles of democracy we try to deliver, and economic benefits we need to have. For Russians, for their state now, and Putin as a person who rules the case there, humankind and human rights means nothing, absolutely. But economic interest, yes. And if now Germany declares that if you don't stop this war tomorrow, the day after tomorrow we'll impose sanctions for all the gas sector, all the oil sector of Russia. No export for you, and no country should do this. So in this way, they would start calculating their money. And you know the corruption in Russia is very strong. This is money generated later in their pockets. They would say, okay, we will be absolutely poor. Putin, his team, followers, and so on. Okay, finally, we are going to stop this war. And just to prove my point of view, last week, after Istanbul summit, our party, Ukrainian party, negotiating party, provided them with a draft of the whole agreement, peaceful agreement. Russian party declared, okay, we are happy. We are almost happy, almost, but we need some time to sign. Okay, 3 days are over, and they try to declare the same. We need some time. Yes, we need some time because, regrettably, the day of victory is not, for example, 9 of April. It's 9 of May, and we need to wait. They're crazy about propaganda, and this day is very important for them. So if you ask me, what is the deadline for all this terrific case called war and these consequences, I think this is the May 9. Let's wait, but probably I'm right. But what should happen next? As for sanctions, should be these sanctions disregarded and cancelled? I think no. No, Russia should start some sort of diplomatic negotiations with other countries about economic peace. They are talking to Ukraine about military peace. Let them talk to other countries about economic peace, how to behave in the way to be recognized as a civilized country from the economic, military, diplomatic point of view. And I hope other countries are waiting for this. And as soon as this peaceful agreement with Ukraine will be signed, I think Russia would behave in the way I have just outlined, step by step, because they want to recognize that their attempts to blackmail the world failed absolutely, because in this way, Putin will lose his power in Russia. This is my case. I want to deliver to you. So you're absolutely right about economic background of this issue, but we cannot let Russia move in the way they moved last 3 decades, in very brutal, unrespectful way related to general rules of globalizations, where negotiations should be strong, countries should be peaceful, and economic rules should be mixed with the human rights. This is my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kostyuk. Thank you for your important contribution. And thank you, Carla, for your help as well. I think this is the point in which we have a few minutes for a Q&A session, if some of the participants have some questions for Professor Kostyuk and myself. Carla, are you
Yes.
taking? Yeah, thank you very much.
So we are over time, but it would be great if we could address a few of the questions before we close. From Merit, we have, she's wondering if the current war could trigger a major financial crisis as most economies are contracting, and would the IFI intervention be sufficient to bail out most ailing economies?
Yeah, I suppose this is for me. Okay, well, I'll try to be short. Regarding the financial crisis, it depends how long does it last, how long it lasts. If it's a short term, as we said, we're going to have pensions in terms of soaring prices, and evidently governments, as it is occurring now in Egypt or in other countries we mentioned, they have to step in and try to get support, like in this case with IMF is helping Egypt, and other countries are more or less in the same situation, with the support to basically to navigate this period and avoiding that might have excessive imbalances, or they might have excessive shock on debt repayment or other situation, or so debt, financial troubles, or companies problems. If lasts longer, longer I mean in terms of many months, if not years, of course, then the consequences might be more complex and more widespread. And I don't know if the IMF has the strength, the resources to go and help all the countries in a similar situation, like the one we just mentioned before, you know, Peru and Turkey, or Egypt, Sri Lanka, and many more along the way. They will come, especially those that we said before. They might have, they might be net importers of raw materials and commodities. They might be, might have some kind of imbalances. They might have some kind of weak balance sheet, balance of payments, deficits, and so on. So they might have some structural problems that are not easy to solve. So it depends how long does it last. Of course, the IMF and the other multilateral organization can do a lot, but it depends how long it lasts and how many countries involved. A little bit what happened with COVID. Now, COVID was global, was worldwide, and they received a lot of support exceptional support, but evidently, even the exceptional support with the special drawing rights and stuff like that was not sufficient for all the situations. And so there might be some kind of credit problems or financial problems or restructuring.
Okay.
I hope I've answered.
Thank you. We have a question for Dr. Kostyuk. What do you say to the German argumentation that stopping the gas import will not stop the war, that the German government sees China and India as potential buyers?
I think that Germany is under siege of their previous mistakes, mostly not economical mistakes, but mostly political mistakes. I think they tried to play double game with regard to some power, yes, country as economic power in Europe, and from this point of view, and another way of game, and was about trying to tame, better said. Now to shame would be much better, but to tame this superpower called Russia. But I think they made mistake because they tried to tried to predict unpredictable country. And this is a strongest problem, because unpredictable country is a residual of unpredictable power, political power. So if we are talking about economics, yes, we are right. So this is a commodity power, and what should we do? Try to communicate. But if they try to use military exposures and invasions to other countries, so are we talking about globalization? No, we are talking about canceling of all rules of globalization. And what way should be used to put this situation in order? For Germany, they should declare finally what should it expect to have as relationships with Russia in, for example, 5 years. What are their expectations? I don't know. Even a year, I don't know. To be frank, they have no policy at all now. And superpower, Germany is superpower also in Europe, is a shame not having a policy of relationships with a country that is a commodity power like Russia. Germany is afraid to declare this, but I think they don't have such sort of policy, such sort of strategy. And now it will be much better for them to recognize this and to say, okay, we'll start writing this story of new world, of the process called globalization from beginning, from the blank list, white list, and nothing more. Okay.
Okay,
Thank
you. We have a question about the increased use of cryptocurrency and whether or not that's affecting the central banks in Russia, for Dr. Pezzuto.
Yeah, well, yeah, as you see, crypto has been one of the solutions, one of the options for Russia oligarchs to move around money in this period, especially because of the sanctions and the frozen freeze on the reserves and money movements on the street system and others. So basically, the cryptocurrency and the this new digital solutions have helped them escape some of the restrictions. By definition, crypto is a decentralized, platforms that not subject to central control and authority. Even European authorities have expressed themselves in the sense of keeping it available without restrictions, despite this, at least for. So it's naturally increasing in its trading, its opportunities, because of the, and even the U.S. President Biden has expressed himself, but not to do in a way of limiting significantly the use. So basically, it's definitely growing in this context, and probably it's one of the few channels where the Russia can, together with other agreements with other countries, using their own payment system, cross-border, or perhaps the other ones of the other countries like China's CHIPS system or others, to payments cross-border trades. Keeping in mind, of course, that these structures are not as widely developed as of course, the U.S. one, the SWIFT, which is leading one, basically it's the global standard on that side. But yeah, especially with the use of the crypto, with the use of cryptocurrencies, and perhaps even dark web, they can do a lot of uncontrolled or limitedly controlled activities and transfer that might not come on the traditional payment systems. Yeah. So I think that in this sense, we will see this growing even more in the future and evolve to some kind of a new landscape. We will have to see what will be the regulation in the future around this type of payments, potentially limit some of the loopholes for sanctions.
Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry, everyone, that we're not going to be able to get to more of your questions as we are out of time today, but I really want to thank Professor Pezzuto and Dr. Kostyuk for joining us and sharing these insights with us. I will be sending the recording of the session along with the slides to everyone who is registered for the session. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you very much, Carla, for your contribution, especially to Professor Kostyuk. All the best. Good luck for this difficult period, and thank you very much. We know and we appreciate how difficult it is the moment, and how demanding it was for you from Ukraine to participate today from your town of Sumy, and we appreciate that a lot. It's a really special and congratulations for your resilience. You and your team are doing an incredible job in an incredible situation.
Thank you, Ivo. I think next time, probably very soon, we'll talk about the same, about globalization, but not with a reference to the war, but with a reference to peace.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, and we look forward to meeting you in person again.
Yes, once again, yes, I'll be happy to let you know what would happen after peace. Okay, comes.
Say a great hello to all your team members, all your friends, and all your colleagues that I had the pleasure to meet. And thanks to all thanks all the participants for attending this meeting today.
Thank you
for your great question. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.